Coming up, with the shocking news of adults and children dying as they attempt to cross the freezing waters of the Channel, I hold Boris Johnson and Priti Patel accountable. By offering a safe, legal and practicable route for asylum seekers and refugees to enter Britain, they could do away with coastal patrols, payments to France, people smugglers and deaths in the Channel at a stroke. And because of Brexit, such tragedies are ever more likely to be repeated. Let me explain. Before I get into it, if you enjoy this channel, please like this video, subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new releases twice weekly. The number of people crossing the Channel in this so-called immigration crisis are relatively tiny. If spread evenly across the UK, the medium-sized town of 14,000 where I live would gain an additional 5 or 6 courageous and resourceful people. Hardly enough to swamp the local hospital, schools or traffic flow. And the latest official figures show that actually more people are leaving the UK to live elsewhere than are actually coming here from other countries. In other words, this country has negative net migration. It also has over 1 million registered job vacancies for the first time in the nation's history. It has an ageing demographic and an economy that's crying out for younger people to come in and pay taxes to fund public services. Let's just imagine that you're an alien visiting Britain for the very first time. You're told this information and you're then informed that immigration is the government's stated #1 priority. Wouldn't you kind of assume that what this meant was that the government wanted to prioritise more immigration, not less? What would you make of Home Secretary Priti Patel's planned legislation to allow border force vessels to push the unseaworthy small boats used by cross-channel migrants back into French waters? French waters when we're talking about migrants, that is, but of course British waters if we're talking about fish. I think you rightly conclude that the British government couldn't give a toss about the safety and well-being of those human beings attempting to come here across the Channel. In fact, worse than that, Johnson and Patel are actively seeking to cause these desperate individuals harm. When it comes to taking in asylum seekers and refugees, the British government always claim that we do our share, but this isn't true. As a proportion of our population, we do nothing like our fair share. France, Spain, Germany, Greece, they all take in far more of these people than we do. So what is truly behind this nasty government's hostility to desperate asylum seekers and refugees? Have you figured it out? The answer is, of course, Brexit. While normal people like you and I feel tremendous empathy for these desperate souls taking their lives in their hands, embarking on that cross-channel nightmare, your average Tory voter is telling the pollsters that the government's current response is too soft. You can even imagine a few of them brainwashed with tabloid talk of illegal immigrants and an immigration crisis, reacting to the news of 27 deaths in the Channel this week with remarks like, "serves them right," or even, "I wish it happened more often." These Brexit voting Tories were given the promise that Johnson's government were going to take back control of our borders. Of course, no one explained to them that the nature of a border is that it has 2 sides, so you can only take back control of it with the cooperation of your neighbour on the other side of the border, which in our case, of course, is the EU. A bit of a paradox for Johnson, because any cooperation with France will be seen as a breach of the commitment to take back control of our borders, which we can't do without cooperation with France. Quite a dilemma, especially when you realise that controlling immigration was yet another of those golden unicorns in the sunlit uplands of Brexit land. The shining beacon of restored sovereignty and independence from the EU. The problem is, like with all the other lies, falsehoods and fakery of Brexit, the idea of just pulling up the drawbridge to Castle Britain is a giant con. Controlling any country's borders requires international agreement and cooperation, which is the very thing Johnson can't be seen to be pursuing. Instead, his government spend their time insulting the French and wheeling out Jacob Rees-Mogg to taunt them with jingoistic quips about Waterloo and Agincourt designed to fire up the Gaminati. As I pointed out in a recent video, the last-minute, badly prepped and ill-thought-out Brexit agreement that Lord Gormless David Frost and his handler Boris Johnson signed up to took the UK out of the Dublin Agreement, which was part of the EU rules, meaning that people who have come here through a safe EU country could be returned to that country by the UK. Ah, said Priti Patel, my Home Office will instead introduce post-Brexit rules so that we can carry on removing those people and sending them back to that safe third country. Only, as I said earlier, we only took back control of our side of the border. We have no power to force that third country to take these people back. Brexit has made the whole situation far, far worse. Patel boasts about agreeing bilateral deals with these third countries, but I've checked, and guess what I found? Post-Brexit Britain has no return agreements with any EU country. Our government proposed a post-Brexit replacement for the Dublin arrangement, but the EU turned it down.
Welcome to the Brexit, sir. I'm sorry.
Which is why the UK has returned only 5, yes 5, of the 25,000 people who have crossed from France in small boats so far this year. Before Brexit, many thousands were returned each year. I think that's quite possibly the first Brexit benefit I've ever identified, but whether your average Brexit voter would claim that as a benefit, well, I have my doubts. But it's clear to me that the UK should be welcoming the vast majority of these predominantly young, dynamic and resourceful people who will, like their predecessors before them, prove to be net contributors to our nation's wealth, that will fill all those job vacancies and therefore boost our economy, that will pay taxes, that will fund the increasing costs of providing health and social care to an indigenous, ageing population, and last but not least will add to the rich culture and diversity of a modern, global-facing and cosmopolitan Britain. I somehow don't think that a Tory party, infiltrated and now controlled as it is by the far-right UKIP tendency, will quite share this vision.